Caleb Quaye, it is such an honor to have you on the program, my brother.
Thank you.
You
Good to
know,
be here.
so Motown was underground, but I've talked to enough of the cats, guys like, happens to be his birthday today, Stephen Ferroni, Alex
Oh, yeah.
Litcherwood,
Yeah.
you know, Ben E. King, a lot of the
Hmm.
blues masters. Again, we're not talking about Train, McCoy, Elvin, those cats, but
Right.
or
Yeah.
Motown for that matter. It wasn't like Marvin Gaye was coming over, but the original blues masters were coming. Where you saw them live.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And now they were playing intricate. They weren't necessarily playing 12-bar blues. Sometimes they go deeper in. They didn't have academic training, and I
Right.
just wonder what you could talk about as it related to, even though it may not have been academically right
Hmm.
with those guys, it still felt really good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Boy, well, I mean, we loved it, and Elton especially. He got to with Bluesology. They were backing some of these artists because they would come over and they would use a pickup band in England.
Right, right.
So we got to play with some of these people. And so that's where you kind of learned how they felt the music. I remember the first time John Lee Hooker came to England. So that would be in 1964, I believe.
Wow.
And I went to see him. I was just fresh out of school, and I went to see him at a club called the Flamingo. And a lot of the blues guys used to play there. And the thing that really hit me so strongly was that John Lee Hooker, he actually dictated the rhythm to the band. So normally back in those days, when a band would start a tune, the drummer would count it off. 1, 2, 3, boom, and in it. They didn't do that with John Lee Hooker. John Lee Hooker just started doing this shuffle beat on his guitar, and then the band came in. And I thought, this is the first time in my life I've ever seen a guitar player actually lead the band and dictate the rhythm.
Absolutely.
And the end result was, it was like a tribal kind of experience, because I looked around and the whole club was packed out and everybody's bouncing up and down in time to this groove that John Lee Hooker had established. It was absolutely amazing.
You
And
know,
the only other guy,
yeah.
the only
No,
other guy
yeah.
shortly after that I saw do that was Hendrix. Hendrix did the same thing. The drummer did not count off the tune. Hendrix stated the rhythm. He laid it down, and then everybody came in.
Caleb,
That was
this is
a
so
big influence
phenomenal
on me.
because
Right.
I love that word tribal. Anytime I go to a concert
Yeah.
with my peers, I mean, obviously not symphonic, but
Yeah.
that is the word that I try to bring that vibe and energy from
Mhm.
the audience. Why do you think? And so the drum is always, to me, the instrument that creates descarga or the tribal feel.
Yeah.
But here
Yeah.
you're talking about the front man, in this case Hooker and
Yep.
Hendrix.
Yep. Yep.
Why was that tribal as opposed to the drummer? In terms of them leading that and getting everybody swaying.
Yeah. I think primarily, and especially leading back into those days, their approach to the instrument was different to guitar players in the UK.
In what way?
In the fact that, and I think it's a DNA thing. I think it's part of their African heritage.
Absolutely.
Their approach was rhythmic.
Totally. So therefore, you get that groove going with the front man who's already feeling their own inner time feel.
That's right.
And the rest of the band just picks it up and it goes higher and higher and higher and higher.
Yeah. See, those kind of players, they can get you going without a band. They can do it just with the guitar and the vocals. They can set the whole thing up on the instrument. So even though it's a guitar, the way you play it, there's drums and bass already in there because of the way they approach, the rhythmic aspect of the way they approach their instrument. It's very different to European style guitar playing.
it's fascinating. Was that something that you think is like Hooker and Hendrix? Are there other
Mhm.
cats? I'll tell you this right now. When I one of my interviews with Billy Cobham, he said
Mm.
that there were only two cats that had the courage to open and close for the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Most people didn't want to close for them. You know, Zappa
Hmm.
didn't want to close for them.
Sure.
There were situations at, like, the Beacon Theater or something where, Mahavishnu
Yeah.
opened, everybody left the venue, Cannibal Adderley sitting there, the crowd's empty, right?
Yeah.
There's two bands, Edgar
Yeah.
Winter, White Trash, and
Mm.
then this is what I'm getting at. The other cat who would close and with audacity was Solo Taj Mahal,
Ah.
dobro and storytelling. Again,
Yeah.
driving that rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And
Yeah.
that to me is what it's about. And I just wonder, from your lens, being that you've been on this earth a lot longer than myself,
Uh-huh.
um, how did we get away? Not again, there's part of it is the African ethos. There is
Yeah.
that driving rhythm. But
Sure.
how did we drift away from the responsibility of everybody in the band having their own inner time feel? And what I mean by that is there's sort of a concept today, and in pop music, again, it's genre related, but
Yeah.
oh, the drummer is going to hold it down, or that's the rhythm section's job. That, in my
Mm.
mind, is ridiculous because no matter what the music, everybody should have their own inner time feel.
Yeah.
Everybody should have that. And that allows, even in the pop setting, even in a 4-minute tune, it
Right.
allows the rhythm section to play melodically. But if people
Sure.
don't have their own inner time feel, then you rely on the rhythm section and the music becomes a little bit formulaic. And I just
Right.
wonder, because I mean, you played with all these guys who were angular. Everybody
Yeah.
had their own inner time feel.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wonder in your mind how we got away from that, because it is intoxicating. The music is intoxicating like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, I think a lot of it has to do with the advancement of technology.
Yeah.
I think the digital age has really killed that, because now you can just sample something, press a button, come up with something, and it may sound good, but it's what it lacks is the uh,
Soul,
it's
Grease.
soul
Yeah,
and yeah, and the chemistry between musicians, the
exactly.
organic feel that just cannot be replicated by pushing a button. A lot of people ask me, gosh, I mean, a lot of young students have asked me, how come, the I'll just the Tumbleweed
Sure.
Connection album
Yeah.
from Elton John, how come it still sounds so good today? That stuff still stands up, and I said, well, the only answer I can give you is we were playing our instruments live in the studio together.
Exactly. No baffles. No
Yeah,
baffles.
a
Yeah.
very minimal, there was no fancy stuff, there was no digital equipment. So it's it was back in the organic world. It's organic music. Yeah.
Exactly. And we can't go back to that. And also, it's just, with studio time
Yeah.
being expensive and just the idea of trying to record to. Can you talk about those early sessions, Tumbleweed, or even
Oh yeah.
in the sense of like, also not just the fact that you guys were all hitting at the same time, so there's minimal overdubs, but
Right.
on top of that, the idea that, like, maybe I'm curious about how did the engineer have you guys come in, play, and then mic the room? Because to me, it was like
Right.
the old school recordings, even though Motown was kind of underground, Chess
Yeah.
Records, maybe one right and left overhead on the drums, and maybe one for the kick drum, but there was a lot of leakage.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about how organic the miking was? Because that to me is,
Yeah.
on top of just the human element of it, is why the music is just so alive.
Yeah. 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 Well, there's one thing. It's interesting you asking about the engineers, because that's something that's not talked about much these days in the digital age.
Totally.
And back then, in the in the different studios, um, engineers, and I used to be one as well. So engineers, part of their job was not only knowing how the board works, but knowing the room.
Exactly.
That's a skill that's just like not happening these days, because
Right.
when you press a button, you get whatever the machine gives you and you work with that. But back then, these guys were very skilled. So here's an interesting story. Atlantic Studios in New York back
Yes.
then,
Yes.
Bernard Purdy, they nailed his drums to the floor in the studio, and nobody was allowed to move those drums because the engineer knew that part of the room was where the drum sound is happening. And under threat of death, nobody was allowed to
That's
move those
great,
drums.
man.
That's a true story.
I
It's a
did.
true story.
I believe it.
Yeah. So this is why when you listen to those records from back in those days, there's this indigenous quality, and in fact, we used to have competitions. We buy a bunch of records, me and Reg and some other guys, we buy a bunch of records, we sit down and listen to them, and without reading the liner notes, the competition was, okay, we'd have to say, okay, what studio was it recorded in? Who was the engineer? Who was the producer? Because all these guys had their styles that were associated with a particular studio.
Wow.
Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. I'm just curious if you were talking about stuff that was happening across the pond where you were living, or you're talking about Atlantic or
Yeah,
chess or the
yeah,
American.
all of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Both. Yeah, all of it. Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Absolutely. And so you could tell EMI, but then you could tell, oh, that's Chess Records.
Wow. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's Gary Starr engineering at Chess Records, or that's
Or
Detroit.
like
And
Glenn Johns, or that kind
yeah,
of. Yeah.
absolutely,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So all of these guys, they had their production style was geared to the studio that they loved to work in, and so too with the engineers.
I'm
So
curious about, like, if you any session from that time, because I
mhm.
like Ron Melo used to be the original chess engineer,
Okay,
and
yeah,
Melo, and a drummer, David Kemper, used to tell me about these early sessions where he'd have all the musicians come in the room,
hmm,
and they'd play a tune, and then he'd say, okay, the bass needs a little bit more here, and
yeah,
he'd mic for the players. It wouldn't just be miking the room and then saying, here you go, record.
right, right, right,
You,
right.
you see what was any? Can you talk about some of the an unsung engineer that maybe did that with the group of cats in the studio with you, that
Um,
record still holds up well today, if not better?
yeah. Well, the engineer on that record was a guy called Robin Cable, who was absolutely brilliant. He knew that room inside and out, and he was real quick in setting stuff up. We would go in there, and he already had there was a designated drum booth, and a spot where for the guitar, etc. And so he put us in there, and we would run stuff down, and he would listen, and depending on what kind of audio concept that they were working with, he would say, hold on a minute, I need to change the mic on whatever, the bass or the
Right.
guitar or whatever. And so he'd made some minimal changes, and then we're off to the races. Again, it's back to that thing, the engineer knew the room. And then of course he also knew the musicians. So after you've been in the studio a few times, the engineer gets familiar with your sound.
Absolutely.
So it's all that's the whole, it's difficult to explain, but that's the whole organic side of it.
It's totally, you're doing a great job. Not being a producer or engineer myself,
Yeah.
but I'm just curious, in today's world, that stuff has basically been eliminated for the most part.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
now explain, is it just a matter of cost prohibitive because you, in the sense of not miking the room to the musicians themselves and already having it set up, or is it just sort of is it an efficiency issue? Why? Because that to me seems absolutely essential, yet it's not really. Or do engineers have this sort of, and here's the other question. Have younger cats just had hyper compressed beats crunched into their ears for the last 3 decades and they don't even know what space is?
That I think is the issue.
Yeah.
They don't know. The young guys just don't know.
I know. It's weird, man. All I listen to is records from this time period, and obviously I have a large palette of music, but the grooves, I can feel the grooves, and it's just different than the electronic beats groove.
Absolutely.
It's weird. I can't exactly explain it, but I am coming up for the downstroke right in that pocket. And my peers, my daughters too, they can hear it. They listen to a lot of the music I listen to. But that's incredible. The hyper compression, the digitiz, the quanti, that's the thing. That was my question, is like, we talked about Hooker and Jimmy, those guys actually, and McLaughlin as well, they were really good rhythm players. They had great rhythm. And I wanted you to talk about from your own point of view, how you believe that developing solid, deep foundational rhythm helped you grow your improvisational chops.
Well, it's a good question. I was always interested in rhythm. When I first started playing the guitar, I actually started out as a rhythm player.
Right.
Totally. And I guess I'm fortunate in that guitar was not my first instrument. When I was a kid, I started playing piano when I was 4. So I had some classical training in there. I understand piano. I love chords. I love chords. So when I got to the guitar, by that time, I'm listening to people like Kenny Burrell and Wes Montgomery. And I loved the sound of the chords and also the whole idea of rhythm, because I was, listening to African music and all this stuff, it was very rhythm oriented stuff from New Orleans and what have you. So rhythm was there from the get-go. And so then when I came to start, busting out some lead licks and everything, it was all based around rhythm. It wasn't just, what they call shredding,
Well, here's the thing. I mean, to me, I remember Terry Haggerty, dear friend from the Sons of Champlin. He said, the guy was playing like bebop through rock changes, or he was just doing sophisticated. But in today's world, he goes, most cats, they are like playing at a very surface level. They're shredding, but there's no bottom to it. So he has to just kind of play rhythm. The most intoxicating thing is listening to David T. Walker or Wah Watson laying that foundation. Even Freddie Green from Basie's band, just because you build that foundation, and then it's like you're on top as an audience member. You're on top of a mountain.
That's right.
But if you don't start with the rhythm and you're just flailing around, then you're wanking it basically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't understand rhythm on your instrument, then you don't know how. You're very limited in how to lock in with the drummer.
Let's talk about that. I mean, Nigel Olsson. Let's just talk about this cat. When did you first connect with him? I find his feel and his tone fantastic. And I'm just curious about, like, even in the bluesology band, who were some of these early drummers that you played with that had sort of the tendency to be able to lock in with you and play melodically but still keep the groove?
Well, my main man in bluesology, the drummer was a guy named Pete Gavin.
Pete Gavin.
Gavin, yeah, he's not with us anymore. But
he left us,
Yeah, he was a great drummer. But my main man from back in those days is Roger Pope.
Talk about these are not. I'm loving these names because I'm not. I'm familiar with like John Heisman, or
Yeah, I knew John very well. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
and there's other cats that I'm sort of spacing on. Please talk about Pope. I mean, these drummers. There was no book, man. You
right.
played. It didn't matter. Like the kick drum didn't need to line up with the bass. It was just like as a
Yeah,
group, you guys went
yeah,
into battle together. I just want you to talk about locking in with Pope.
yeah. Well, Roger was great. We met. We first met. I first met him on a TV show. It was a big show back in England called Ready Steady Go. So I first met Roger in 1966, and he was playing with a band called the Soul Agents, which
Wow.
was like an organ trio
Sure.
group, So very kind of Jimmy Smith oriented, But what they were doing, they were backing on this TV show. They were backing Buddy Guy,
Mm-hmm. Of
the great blues guitar player.
course, still doing it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And Roger, I was really impressed with Roger because now Roger he grew up in a jazz background because his father was a jazz drummer. And so I'm listening to this band back in Buddy Guy. And Roger was one of the back in those days, one of the few drummers in England that could do the Art Blakey shuffle.
Really,
Oh yeah.
he was a real serious. I mean,
He was
yeah.
amazing. He could
Wow.
make the thing swing. I mean, really great. And so Roger and I were tied to the hip musically together for like 10 years. He was Hookfoot's drummer. He's the guy laying down the groove on Tumbleweed Connection.
Oh, I love this. I
Yeah.
love this.
Roger was amazing. Nigel was good, but Nigel was more of a pop drummer.
Definitely not a jazz drummer. I
No, no,
dig.
no,
I
no,
dig.
no.
I love his sense. But I mean, he makes
Yeah.
pop records feel good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But Roger can do it all. Roger was amazing.
Is he still with us?
No, he's not. He passed away in 2013.
So there's a few more cats I want to get to. Just as far as like, it's always interesting to me. McLaughlin at a certain period of time was riffing poetry in coffee houses with bands back in the '60s before he came to the States.
Yeah.
Auger
Yeah.
was over there. Brian
Yeah.
Auger played with Long John Baldry. I'm not sure if he was
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
what about these two cats? One is Jack Bruce. The other
Mm.
is Graham Bond. Because I mean, dude, I'm talking like this is I have been deep into the regional music of this country. I
Yeah.
try to reach out, but man, you guys across the pond really were. I mean, you weren't comping cats. I mean, you were influenced by people,
Right.
but then you
Right.
were taking it into your own vernacular, which is what I
Exactly.
love, man.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we were doing. Well, Jack Bruce, as everybody knows, was the bass player for Cream.
Yeah, and he was playing upright with Les McCann when he first came over here.
Yeah, Jack
It's
was. Oh,
insane.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jack was a great musician. He had some classical training, but also, jazz sensibility. So he crossed a lot of musical territory. And originally was playing with Graham Bond, the Graham Bond organization.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, before Cream. So Jack and Ginger Baker were playing in Graham Bond's band,
Holy cow.
and they came out of there and joined with Eric Clapton to form Cream. Yeah.
What would you describe? Because I just found this album. I don't think you're on it. Holy Magic, Graham Bond, and he passed away couple years after this.
Yeah.
But was that music that? What was the music that Graham and Jack and Ginger were playing? That was not Cream music.
No, they were doing more blues, jazz, there was some original music in there, but then there was also covers of American blues tunes.
Interesting.
Yeah. High-heeled sneakers, they did a version of that. Tommy Tucker's High-Heeled Sneakers.
So you guys were eating up the Booker T and the MG stuff.
Yeah,
Did you
oh yeah.
you connected with Duck Dunn though quickly?
I didn't. Unfortunately, I never got to meet them. I always wanted to.
What a character, man! You guys would have had a ball together.
Yeah, I want to meet Steve Cropper to shake his hand because he was a huge influence on me.
Well, I got his. I'm good friends with Steve. I can definitely get you his contact. You're
Oh,
if you're in
that'd be
the
great.
yeah,
He's on my bucket list.
he's a beautiful cat, man.
That's
You know,
great.
I wanted you to talk. Being your dad was a jazz. Was he playing like trad jazz? Was he a bebopper? What would you say he was in terms of his style?
Yeah, he was a bebopper. He was a multi-instrumentalist.
Ah,
He was a drummer and piano player and a vocalist. And when he was 16 years old, he was playing drums for Fats Waller.
no way.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That is. I have a 78 collection that just fell. The cover fell off, and it's this great picture of Fats Waller. I've been just looking at it every day at work. I
Yeah.
cannot believe he was playing drums.
Yeah. When Fats Waller came and toured Europe, my dad got the gig at 16 years old playing drums for Fats Waller.
So talk. The one thing I want you to riff on, because you had, what was the best part of the education of being in a family band, like, or just being immersed in music? Because, you know, even when, I'm not sure when you actually got to the States, but still, it was just still basically North Texas and Berkeley. Not every
Mhm.
school had a jazz program.
Yeah,
Now everything's codified and
yeah,
there are books
yeah,
on everything, and there's so much pressure to conform. But
yeah,
being in a musical family, I mean, it can be pretty cutthroat. I've talked to guys with fathers who they were. I mean, Andre Fisher from Shaka Khan, his dad was
oh yeah,
playing with Claire Fisher. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
those
yeah.
guys were no jokes, and they
Right.
had a high bar you had to
Yep.
cross. Was
Yep.
that the same
That's
way
right.
with you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, he used to say, when he could see I was getting serious about music, he would say, "Son," he says, "always listen to the best players." He says, "That way you're going to learn something. They're going to show you the bar and you're going to learn something." And he would say, "Don't waste your time listening to people that don't know what they're doing. You won't learn anything."
Well, and on the flip side, what about the idea of did he say to you, Caleb, go out and play with cats that are better than you?
No, because well, he left us before I'd got to that
Okay,
stage.
okay, yeah, I was gonna say that's a later. He's talking about the early on listening.
Early on, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
So
dig.
yeah, so in terms of an education, I mean, what I enjoyed and still remember were the incredible jam sessions that happened in our house when some of these amazing musicians would come to town and my dad would cook for them, and he
Let's
would
talk
do
about this,
shows
please.
with them.
Please break this down.
Well, I mean, I still remember as a kid, 5, 6 years old, Dizzy Gillespie bouncing me on his knee
I knew it. I
while
Dizzy,
he's
the
playing
spirit.
the trumpet.
Oh
And
my.
my dad knew these guys. He
Yeah,
knew these guys.
absolutely.
He was great friends. Charlie Parker was one of his best friends. So was Django Reinhardt.
Holy cow.
So we had the cream of the crop, players from Duke Ellington's orchestra coming through the house. And so there I would sit as a kid listening to this amazing music being played in our living room.
Um, was he cooking like Jamaican food, or what kind of food?
Yeah, Caribbean, mixture of Caribbean, West African food. He was a good cook.
Oxtail.
Yeah, and some curry stuff,
Oh my God! So those
Oh
guys,
yeah,
you know,
jazz food,
because
jazz food.
Alan Toussaint. I'm not sure if you ever made it down to C. Saint
Yes, I
Studios.
worked with Alan Toussaint. Yes,
So you know that he had those cats used to. I mean, I've interviewed all the meters, and
yeah,
he'd have a woman cooking during the day.
that's right. Yes.
Unbelievable,
Oh
man.
yes, sir. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wait, hold on.
Absolutely.
When did you first get down to C. Saint? What were you down there for?
I was down there in gosh, it would be I'm gonna say 1980, 79, 80,
Wow,
around there.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Cab K.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
Cab
his.
K. This is so important because, you know, there's a folklore. Dizzy was like beyond genius.
Mm-hmm.
Bird the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But like someone like Bird or Art Taylor or Dexter,
Yeah.
Dolphy. I mean,
Yeah.
these guys are folkloric now. Like they were. I
Yeah.
mean, they were stars then.
Yeah.
But I just wanted you to talk about like and maybe I'm wrong, but just sort of the lack of like almost I don't want to say they were egoless, but can you talk about how the vibe that they used to give off? I mean, jazz was a blue collar music. It came out of
Hmm.
the blues. It
Hmm.
was not this sort of classicalized version of jazz that we have today. There's a
Hmm.
lot of, I mean, you could honestly say that the first fusion music was Dizzy Gillespie and Chano Pozo. That was in the
Hmm.
mid '40s. So there was
Yeah.
a lot of the roots were in the music, but more to the point, these guys were scuffling too. Not necessarily maybe Dizzy and these guys, but some of them were junkies. Some of them
Oh
did.
yeah.
Some of them didn't get paid for sessions. I mean,
Yeah.
Grant
Yeah.
Green, they'd pay him in
Yeah.
dope. I mean,
Yeah.
can you talk? You talk about jazz food. What was your
Yeah.
interpretation when you got old enough? What was your interpretation of the jazz life?
It was very sad.
Sad.
Yeah, because I saw a lot of these guys were totally messed up, even though they were geniuses. They were musical geniuses.
Absolutely, man.
They were prophets to culture through their art.
Hmm.
It's the best way I can
Yeah,
describe
I
it.
love. Explain what that means. That is the one of the most poetic things I've heard in this calendar year.
Well, I think that the artistry of jazz, especially back then, was to somehow um, bring forth some reflection of what was happening in culture.
Totally.
So it's a prophetic music. you know
It was also the timing of it. Like you had
hmm
someone like Hugh Masekela,
yeah,
who was brought over by guys like Dizzy.
yeah, yeah,
The diaspora was still
yeah,
kind of intact.
right.
Again, I wasn't even born. I mean, John Hendricks told me, the singer. I'm not sure if
Hmm.
you ever, rest in peace. I mean, he said in America, without the Sicilians, there'd be no jazz in America.
Yeah,
Like
right.
they, and so it's,
Yeah, with the clubs and everything. Yeah.
well,
Hmm.
he said they didn't use the N word. He goes, they didn't treat us like N. They didn't treat
Right.
us like, they recognized our genius and they got paid
Yeah.
for it. But why? What did your dad? Was your dad heartbroken? Doesn't sound to me like he was. Was your dad messed up too, or did he just have?
Well, he was. I mean, he had his problems with alcohol and stuff.
Yeah,
But yeah, he was saddened by it. Now, of course, back in those days, there was still the great. There was, what would you call it? The racial divide.
I want to say this. I want to. This is. I'm so glad you brought that up. John Mayall, in
Hmm.
our interview, he said there was no color bar in England. The color bar has always been in the States.
Yeah.
Now
Well,
talk
yeah,
about that because he I mean, I know that there's racism everywhere, but
sure.
it was very defined here. Not
Right.
so much in England. I don't know. Is that accurate for you?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And I think that's one of the reasons that the jazz and blues artists
Absolutely.
loved coming to England, because we basically rolled out the red carpet for them because we loved their music.
Totally. They were treated like the geniuses that they were.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Very respected. And then we'd hear stories of, when they get back to America, they go do a gig and they got to go through the kitchen, or they're not allowed to
Exactly.
stay in certain kinds of hotels and et cetera, et cetera. So that wasn't that way in England.
It's fascinating. I mean, you did choose. Talk a little bit about um explain to the audience, not just myself,
Yeah.
why you came to the States. The interesting
Right.
thing is that like many of the cats, even today, guys that are, good friends of mine, like Ron Carter, you know,
Yeah.
they live in the States, but their
Yeah.
music and their living and livelihood is consumed in other parts of the world. But
Gotcha.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious about at that time why you decided to come to the United States.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's very simple. So I moved here in 1974. So in early 74, Hookfoot broke up because the music scene had changed in England.
Hmm.
and it got into this whole glitter stuff.
It was glam rock,
Glam rock, yeah, the glitter
but it was a
stuff.
lot more about like showmanship
Absolutely,
than
yeah.
music. Yeah, I did.
And wearing crazy makeup and just, and I was nothing to do with that at all.
It's
I
like
was
Bowie, like David Bowie kind of stuff, or I mean, what are we talking
kind,
about?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
T-Rex, Mark Bolan, all that kind of stuff. And
Sure, sure.
I couldn't stand it, and to me it was like the musicality of everything was just going downhill, and everything was just based on image.
Right.
And
Wow,
so
that is so insane that that started in '74.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
with you, man. Go ahead.
So I was obviously, was greatly influenced by American music. So I was offered an opportunity to move to America, which I did in '74. Moved to Chicago,
Wow.
which was great because I wanted to get to chess studios. I wanted to get to the
Oh
roots
my God,
of the
the best
music that I'd
bash. Yeah,
always loved.
that's great. Yeah.
So I got to become friends with, and still am with a great guitar player, Phil Upchurch.
Dude, I did 2 epic interviews with that beautiful man. Please tell me
Yeah,
he's still with us.
he's still with us. Yeah, he's
Is
still
he
going
doing all
strong.
right? I mean,
He's Yep, he's doing great.
good. I love it, dude. Please, that man. I interviewed Cash McCall. Rest in
Hmm.
peace. I mean, that dude would talk after sessions
Yeah,
about Phil Upchurch inviting the cats over to his house and
yep.
watching. He would feed rats to his snake and have all the cats watch it, dude.
Yeah.
And he was all now. This is before Caleb. Before you came to Chicago, but he would go down
Yeah,
Market Street and there'd be blind dobro players, and there was just
yeah,
clubs everywhere.
yeah.
I needed to know the first time you set eyes on, because you had knew Phil Upchurch before you came over.
Oh
You
yeah, I
knew
knew who
yeah.
he was. Oh,
When was the
absolutely.
first time you? I need to hear about the connection of you and Upchurch, because I mean that man is my hero.
Yeah, well, I was aware of him, from recordings, Muddy
Absolutely, yeah,
Waters,
yeah, yeah.
the Chess Records thing, and not only is Phil a great guitar player, but
Bass,
he
dude,
is
and
a
the
bass
Staples,
player.
all the Staples singers did all the bass on that.
Yeah, yeah,
And that
yeah,
I'm going to ask you a question, Caleb. Only 2 cats back in that time when the studio scene was cooking. There were
yeah.
2 cats that could play lead electric bass. I'm sorry, lead electric guitar or
Uh-huh.
electric bass on sessions.
Yeah.
One was Upchurch. The other, do you know who it was? New York studio guy.
Oh,
I know you know who he is, but it may be hard. Upchurch told me this in in one of our
who
interviews.
was that? I'm
He
gonna
was in the
take
band.
this.
He was in the band Stuff.
Okay, it's got to be Eric Gale.
You got it.
Yeah,
Upchurch and Gale, the
yeah,
only two cats you see on records,
yeah,
electric bass or lead electric
yeah.
guitar.
I loved
Unbel-
Eric Gale's playing. I loved it.
Nasty, unbelievable.
So that's the kind of
But
stuff.
do you
So,
were you camped out at Chess? Like when did you first hang with Church?
well, pretty much soon after I got there, because I did a lot of studio work with him, jingles, all kind of
Whoa,
stuff.
whoa, whoa! Let's
And
just
actually,
stop right. Oh, wait, hold on. You were doing like Soulful Strings albums. I need to know what albums you were on, man.
no, I did an album with, in fact, Upchurch and I were on an album with Willie Dixon.
Oh dear,
Yeah.
you're. I don't even know if that's in your credits online, dude.
It may not be. I mean, there's so
Was
much
he on
stuff I've
bass and
done.
you were on guitar?
I believe so, and I
Oh,
believe he switched a couple of times, switched from bass to guitar. Yeah.
this is so. So Eugene was it Satterfield? Did you know him?
Louis Satterfield.
Louis Satterfield.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
didn't know him. No,
He
I
was the
didn't get to
Jamers.
meet.
He was the Jamerson of
Of
Chicago.
Chicago. You got it.
Right,
That's right.
right.
Yeah.
And then my
Morris
dear friend.
Jennings. I knew Morris
Oh my
Jennings, the
God.
drummer. Yeah,
What
absolutely.
about what about Big Cleveland Eaton?
Cleveland Eaton. Yeah, yeah.
Sweet. Hold on. I don't mean to keep jumping around here. How did you get into this? Was it that easy to were you to matriculate right into this? Because I mean, New York studio scene was on lockdown. Like, how did you get in to the chess?
It's funny. I got in there because a lot of those musicians, and back in, I don't know what it's like now, but back in those days, um, there was a lot of studio work of doing commercial jingles.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of those musicians would get booked on these jingles because that was a way of earning easy money. That was,
Suds and duds,
yeah,
Budweiser beer
absolutely,
commercial.
yeah.
I love it. Yeah,
We used to do McDonald's
I
commercials
love it.
and Sears, and all that stuff, and get residuals from it. So that was a way of earning a living. So that's where that's where I met Upchurch in one of those jingle sessions.
And
And Morris Jennings was playing on them as well, And then we go, and there was a great live music scene. So then we go down Rush Street, and they'd see them playing in clubs and what have you.
so what
And
I wanted, this is
yeah.
so classic. So you um were you working out of like, trying to think about what Cleveland used to talk about, because he would have basses stashed in every which studios primarily
Oh
were you working in? Like
gosh,
Universal or
yeah, Universal was one of them. There was another one, and I can't remember I can't remember the names of the
well,
studios.
what
Going
was
back a while.
that Willie? I know we no in the let's just go to the Willie Dixon album.
Yeah.
You can't you talk about I mean, you want to just talk about laying it out for what it is. I mean, that there was no glam rock going on there.
No, 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 no,
So can
no.
you talk about how that session worked? I mean, was there any baffles in there? I mean, how did that work?
That
Was the
session,
drummer in a booth or no?
I think he was. All I can remember of that session, that album was not done at Chess Records. That was done in an 8-track studio in the basement of a drugstore.
Get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kidding me?
Oh no, it was a
Oh my,
classic situation
oh, I
where,
need to hear. This is unbelievable.
oh yeah, yeah. And so it was Willie Dixon and his band, and they drove up fresh off the Chitlin circuit in their mohair suits and everything, got off the bus, filed into the studio. Pine Top Perkins was the piano player.
My hero.
Yeah,
Unbelievable. You're dropping
yeah.
these names right
Oh
now.
yeah, it was amazing. And then myself and Phil Upchurch were hired to just kind of augment the whole thing. The producer was some young white kid who was trying to get Willie's music to cross over into the white audience radio play. And
Wow.
he was trying to, I mean, it was crazy. He was trying to get Willie to change some of the lyrics to his tunes. And there was some arguments went down. It was hilarious. It was like Cheech and Chong. And so while
He
they're,
was trying to whitewash some of the lyrics,
yeah.
make it more palatable,
Oh
right?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so Willie's going, I ain't changing no effing this, that, and the other. This is how it is. Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 3. And while all this is going on, I look over at the piano player, Pine Top Perkins. He's sitting there eating some peanuts, waiting
Uh,
for. I mean, it was just
he
crazy.
wasn't bothered at all. He was just having
Not
a
at all.
snack.
Not at all. He knew exactly what was going down.
Do
Yeah.
we? Please tell me you remember the name of the album,
I honestly don't. I don't
because
remember.
I am really having a hard time finding. I mean, there's the only thing that came out in '74 for him was a live album, which that's if this wasn't live,
No.
that is un. But yeah,
Yeah.
but you have did you actually at one time have your hands on a pressing of it, or do you have a copy of the record?
I
Did it come?
don't. No, I never got a press. I left Chicago, I think, before it was released. Yeah.
So ultimately, um, because were you in? Did you play in any outfits while you were? I mean, Chicago was still, as most cities were in this country in the '70s, driven by the club scene. Did you
Yeah.
have a band or a band you were in Chicago?
I was in a band. Yeah, I was back in a guy called Bill Quaitman, who was a.
Yes, I've seen his records were.
Mhm.
He was gigging in Chicago.
Yeah, he's from Chicago. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was he on down on the south side or Old Town, or where was he playing?
No, in Northwest side, Northwest.
And how would you describe ultimately like that record? I've seen that. That was how did he become a commercial success?
He got signed to CBS through Clive Davis back in those days, and he was, an up and coming, singer songwriter guy.
Mm-hmm. Just going back for a second, I want you to talk to younger cats. I remember the great drummer Ndugu Chancellor. I'm not sure if you ever crossed paths
Oh
with him.
yeah, Leon Chancellor, yeah,
And
and
my
yeah.
beautiful cat, and he was, before he passed, he was working at as a professor at USC, and he said that one of the problems today with kids that are coming into the academy to get
Mhm.
degrees, they might be brilliant and they might be coming in with full rides and but
Mm.
he goes, I don't see him playing with the guys with the rubber bands around their horns enough. The street scholars, so to speak. And what I
Mm.
wanted you to talk about, one of the magical things about this period of time that we're talking about, going back to the John Lee Hooker period, the Jimi
Yeah,
Hendrix period,
yeah.
the Beatles period. I don't want to
Hmm.
talk about other guys, but I want you to talk about how you remained open to skiffle players, guys who just were natural, had their own fluid style. There was no training involved.
Hmm.
And because what Ndugu was saying is, it's about how big a bag of you always need to have repertoire. I'm not saying that,
Yeah,
but now
yeah.
it's about like chops and facility and technique. And yet
Hmm.
before it was more about, well, what's your story to tell? And a lot of those
Yeah,
cats in England, they came from hard scrabble existences. Robbie Robertson and the band did
yeah,
too.
yeah.
And I just want you to talk to younger cats about staying open to the idea of the street scholar, that not everything needs to be so polished and so beautiful and so perfect. That the
Right.
idea, especially in, again, it's genre related, but like, how did you learn to keep an open heart to all music and not look down on cats that were essentially skiffle players?
Boy, that's a good question.
And maybe you did look down on them. I don't know, but I don't think
No,
you did. I know you did.
no, I
Yeah.
didn't. No, no. I was always interested in folk music,
Yeah.
acoustic. So I play a lot of acoustic guitar as well. As I did on the Elton John stuff. So I was always open to that. I think the emphasis on uh, technique and perfection has a lot to do with is what I call this seduction of technology.
And also I want to be clear, visual technology. If there's so much
Yeah,
visual material, before you guys were listening, your ears were huge. There was not the
right.
visual stuff had not taken over. Go ahead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So now everything has to be packaged. We talk about branding.
Yep.
That
Hmm.
was not a concept back then. That wasn't even on the radar, you know.
Yeah,
So
it seems like a dream, dude. It doesn't seem real, man.
yeah. So everything is that's what media, the advancement or the so-called advancement of media has done to us, has done to the music. And I think from
Well, let
uh
me ask you something, because that's, you're nailing it. It's like the idea is someone sees them, they say, "Oh, they're not playing it the right way." People
mhm,
see the way, and someone could have Jimi Hendrix played the guitar upside down,
sure,
but
yeah,
like
yeah,
like anything unorthodox or
yeah.
not based on what is supposed. There's no right. What's this, Caleb? Talk about your idea that there is no right way. I mean, yes, you want to play a gig, you want to do
Yeah,
well, you want to get invited back, but there's more that I just, to me, that was the magic of, I don't care what
yeah,
genre of music it was, but when you were coming
sure.
up, everybody had the freedom to be themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to this thing where music, historically, music reflects culture.
Right.
And not only the music, but also the production of music. It reflects culture. So here's what I mean. When I first started playing, culture, it was a monaural culture. It was mono.
Right.
I mean, I still remember, I'm old enough to remember when stereo first came out.
Right. Right.
You see what I'm saying? So everything was mono. So then as culture progressed, then we had, sending people to the moon. And then there's explosion in scientific technology and the recording arts and sciences. So when I first started recording, 4-track was the state of the art. That was as far as you could go. So the early Beatles records were 4-track, mixed down to mono, boom, that's it. So very simple, limited, very minimal overdubs, no, no bells and whistles. But then all of a sudden we get to 8-track, and then we get to 16-track, which means you can add more stuff. And while that's going on, culture itself is accelerating. It's becoming more complex. And
More
so,
layering, more ability. Like I
absolutely.
totally get it, man.
So you got supersonic travel. People can travel faster. More people can go to more places. There's more noise in the world, and that's getting reflected in music. So now we're getting everything but the kitchen sink is thrown into a musical production.
That is absolutely profound.
Yeah.
You know,
Now you can do anything. Now you can make music sound perfect.
no, but I also the idea is
But
that
unfortunately, it won't feel perfect.
that's right, and and that it all comes down to, well, also just the idea that for a period of time in this country too. I remember doing a couple of interviews with John Densmore and Jack Holtzman from Elektra. That was a boutique label, and a lot
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
guys, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the bean counters were like, well, we don't know what these guys are doing, but
Right.
they're making us money, so we're going to leave them alone.
There you
There was
go.
this short period of time, and then all of a sudden the bean counters got involved with the music making,
Yep.
and that was a big. You
Big
want to talk
shift.
about branding and
Sure.
the efficiency
Mm-hmm.
model? Did you
Yeah.
actually? I just I wanted to ask you about this. Can you talk about how um, God saved your life, if in fact that happened? And what I mean by
Sure.
that is like a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of cats who, um, dealing with all different types of issues and things like that, but they walked away from music,
Mm-hmm.
or they were. I guess here's the question: can you just talk about the time in your life when you surrendered to God, and
Sure.
ultimately how you try to convey the strongest messages of spirit without getting shrouded in dogma?
Yeah. 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 Oh, well, thanks for asking the question. That's great.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah. No, for me, it happened, and my documentary that's about to be released, it's called Louder Than Rock. And what happened to me was literally hearing God speak to me in a hotel room in 1978 on my 30th birthday when I was touring with Hall & Oates. And at that time, I was pretty depressed about all kinds of things. And I was searching for answers to this life, because
Mm.
I've become very successful in my field, had everything the world can offer you, and none of it could fix my internal condition, which was fueled with a lot of anger towards my father and all kinds of things. And so one day I'm sat in this hotel room, and after a birthday party that the band threw for me, and in the wee hours of the morning, they left my room, and I'm sat there just chilling out. And I hear this voice suddenly speak to me, and it was loud enough for me to think that somebody had walked into my room. And I looked around, and there was nobody there. And the voice just said to me, Caleb, from this point on, your life is going to be completely different, and nothing's going to be the same for you ever again. And in a split second, I'm no longer high on all the dope and everything. We've been on the road for 6 months. And I sat there, and in my limited understanding, all I knew was that I had been spoken to. I just didn't know by whom. So I made a promise to myself. I said, one day I'm going to find out who that voice belongs to. So we roll the clock on 3.5 years, and I meet this dear friend, Chester Thompson, used to be the drummer with Weather Report and Genesis.
God, I cannot believe you just dropped his name, dude.
Oh, yeah.
I interviewed the other shed, the pedal kicker from Tower of Power, the organ player.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
the
yeah,
best.
yeah.
I've been Chester Thompson. You met Chester. Go ahead. The other
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And and Chester was putting a jazz group together, and he invited me to join his band. I thought, yeah, I'd love to do that. So we were doing some gigs around town here, and we would rehearse in his studio at his house. And Chester had told me that him and his wife were Christians and that they go to church. I thought, yeah, that's good for you. But there was something different about Chester because we're like the same age. I'm
Yeah.
actually a month older than Chester. We're in the same line of work, but he's not crazy like everybody else. There
Right,
was
right, right,
there
right.
was something different about him
Yeah.
and his wife. They were at peace. They had this solidity about their lives. And I thought, I used to think to myself, this guy and his wife, they've got something. They've gotten hold of something. And whatever it is, I want it. I need it. And cut a long story short, on Easter Day, 1982, he invited me to go to church with him. So I said, okay, I'll go to church. And while we were sat in the church, the same voice that I heard in the hotel room that I promised myself one day I'd find out who that belonged to, speaks to me right there in the church and tells me, Caleb, it's time for you to come home to me today because I have a new life for you. And that's when the light bulb went on, and I knew that that voice belonged to Jesus. And that's when I said yes to Jesus. Easter Day, 1972.
I mean, this is
Complete.
why I do my show, man. The
Wow.
stories like that.
Yeah.
That is so. So you were, even when you heard
Hmm.
you heard the voice in the hotel room,
Yeah.
78.
Hmm.
Did you feel like you were trying? Did you try to cultivate your true nature, as we say, as a Taoism? Like, did you try to? What I'm saying is, like, to me, if you were earnestly trying to search for that
Hmm.
voice,
Hmm.
ultimately that was the intersection of how Chester came into your life.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out, like, in that 2.5 year period, did you try to do better? Did you try to
No,
move?
I
Yeah,
was just trying to survive.
yeah. Stay alive. Yeah, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because my life was falling apart at that time. So on all kinds of just about every level, it was just falling apart. So yeah, I was just in survival mode.
Can
So
you
it
just talk
was,
about? I want you to.
yeah.
This is so important because
Hmm.
for and maybe it goes beyond words, but what was noticeable about the stillness of Chester and his wife?
Well, I mean, that was it. It was like everybody else that I was involved with in the music industry was shoving tons of coke up their nose and was high as was just
It was so prevalent.
so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
random and just all over the place. I was doing studio work and getting paid in dope
Really.
for some of these guys. Yeah, yeah.
But you were
Yeah.
part of the union. They
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
the studio the musicians union was paying you a dope.
Not the musicians union. These would be
Private. These are
producers just
off the
doing
books. Off
stuff
the books.
under the table. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. There was a bunch of us
It
doing
was just
that.
impossible to avoid that stuff, or it was
Sure.
just right in your face all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you saw Chester, it
I thought,
wasn't just so bright. It wasn't just that he was a sober cat. He
yeah.
had a stillness. There was a stillness there.
Absolutely. He was at peace with himself. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It was very different.
You want to talk about how just you want to preview this doc that's coming up a little bit? What do people have? I mean, this is
Sure.
Caleb
Mhm.
Quaye. I mean, this is like I'll be honest. I turned over a Sean Phillips record at work,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I saw your name, and I'm like, wait, we're friends on Facebook. I'm gonna do an interview with this cat. And then I started doing the background. I'm like, holy cow,
Yeah.
man! And it's
Yeah.
just another
Sure.
one of these beautiful people in this milieu. I mean, the way I look at society now, even though, this is what I was gonna say. One of the reasons I just feel like I don't know if younger cats really have a real story to tell anymore, and I
Mm.
think that's part of the issue with singer songwriters. You had a lot of people who just even coming out of the folk scene
Hmm.
were scuffling.
Yeah.
It's hard to play the blues when you grow up in suburbia. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
there's an
yeah,
authenticity thing, but I do feel
yeah.
that as road dogs in the 20, not that you're a road dog, you did that in your career,
Hmm.
but in the 21st century, live spiritual music is one of the only last, to me, is one of is salvation. I don't, and I don't, because I see us sort of, I just wonder how you look at this time that we're in as a reflection of society, and how
Hmm.
important original spiritual collective music is to the people.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. It's important, and because the world is a mess now,
It's a mess, man.
big time. You
You
know.
talked about all the super speed of everything. We're in
Yeah,
like
yeah.
hyper speed now.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and so, but we've been given a book called the Bible that tells the truth, and that's what I had to come to terms with, and I'm so glad that I did. For me as a Christian, Jesus made a radical statement. He says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And he proved it by being raised from the dead. And it's a heart issue. It's a heart faith issue. It's nothing to do with whether or not you go to church.
Totally. It's not about what the show. It's not about
No,
showing it, right?
no,
It's about living
absolutely.
it. It's about living it.
Right, right.
Living
And
your faith. I mean, why has there been such a uh, from your point of view, Bill
mhm.
Maxwell? Do you know Bill, by the way?
I know Bill very
He's
well.
Bill is
Absolutely.
a dear friend of mine.
Good, good.
Is
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
dear, and so is Abe Laborio and
Yeah, yeah,
Adley
yeah,
Moses.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
and like when Bill talked about becoming a Christian, it was like the most beautiful, like it was like service to mankind. It
yeah,
was this vibe of living your faith.
yeah. That's
What
it.
do why what would you say to people who have become completely brainwashed and non-thinking, like not thinking any longer about truth or living
Hmm.
the faith, and just
Hmm.
sort of going groupthink is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
How can you still have an individual mindset and be a good Christian?
Boy.
Because there's a lot of sheep out there, man.
Hmm.
I don't know what's going on right now, because whatever the values that are in the Bible, and I'm not well versed, they
Yeah.
certainly aren't towards certain political leaders these days.
Right, right,
And I
right.
don't understand why millions of quote unquote Christian, how do you break away? How do you still maintain the faith and being good Christian, and
Yeah.
yet being independent minded?
That's a good question. I think if we're talking about musicians, I think one thing is to realize if you're a really gifted musician, is to recognize that the gift didn't come from you.
Absolutely,
It was
man.
given to you by God. And so when you realize that, then that changes everything, because that causes you to turn to God, and it changes your approach to music. So
You are merely a vessel or a conduit
that's
for
right.
information coming through you from the heavens. I am with
That's
you
right.
100%.
Yeah, yeah. And so then you have to look at, why did God give you this gift? Because he wanted you to use it to bless people.
And what you're saying on a bigger scale is that some cats who claim to be faithful, I don't care what religion it is,
Hmm. Hmm.
they believe they are fully responsible for the information coming through them, and
Hmm.
a lot of ego and a lot of resentment comes into
Yeah,
it, because they're not surrendering to the fact that they're only partially responsible for letting
right,
the information come through them.
right, right.
Wow. Did that light come on? I mean, you played a lot of heavy music.
Yeah.
Did that recognition and surrender only occur after you met Chester and received?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
before that, you were really kind of like, it's about me, baby. I got this.
Sure. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, very competitive and all of that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 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 yeah. Now, in fact, for me, after I received Christ, there was a period where I actually stopped playing. And it was like God spoke to me and he said, I want you to put that instrument, which was my guitar. He
Right.
said, I want you to put that away, and I want you to learn a new instrument. It's called the Bible. So I put the guitar away, didn't touch it for about 6 months, shoved it under the bed, and just got into reading the Bible. And that changed my mind about a whole lot of things.
Do you do?
It reset the compass, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Well, I can feel your grace even through the Zoom.
Mhm.
You find yourself with? Do you have a meditation practice of sorts on the daily basis? Christian
Yeah,
meditation.
we call it doing devotions. It's basically reading the Word of God and then
Yeah.
listening to the Spirit. Listening
Does
to
that
what.
voice ever come back and visit you again, or is it has
Oh
that
yeah, many times. Oh,
really?
absolutely.
Oh
Oh
wow.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Caleb Quay, I would love to do set two with you down in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure when the doc's coming out. I just feel like we have more to get to, and I
It's
would
coming
love.
out this Friday.
Get out of here.
This Friday, April the 28th.
Where can people find it? Is
You
it's gonna
know
be
what? On
yeah,
YouTube, I'll tell you what. I've got you on. Uh,
Facebook? Yeah, send me some links.
I'll send you some links. Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right, and what an honor and blessing to connect with you, man. It's such a I got to be honest. I really hope that Willie Dixon album actually got pressed. But man, I look forward to come when I get out there. Looking forward to connecting with you in person, man. It's
Okay.
really an honor to connect with you, man. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Jake. Appreciate it.
All right, bless you, brother. Be good.
Okay.
Talk to you
Thanks.
soon. Bye.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.